She's an alchemist. Everything that is sent to destroy her, to test her, only makes her more powerful. Everything that creates pain, she transmutes into art. She's an alchemist. Everything that she is faced with that feels heavy, she transmutes into light through music, through poetry, through living life, through love. She's an alchemist.
Hey y'all. So I was looking through this really big portrait book. It was a book by a famous photographer called Scavullo, and it showed 50 years of his photography work, and a lot of his work was like musicians, artists, models, transgender people. He did a lot of, he photographed a lot of creatives. And the one person that held my attention in the book the longest, that stopped me dead in my tracks, was Janis Joplin. And this particular photo shoot he did with Janis Joplin was in 1969. I think what stopped me was the words that she said here. So in the pink words, it reads, this is how the photographer described Janis Joplin. When she walked in, she said, "Hi, I'm Janis. I thought you were going to be a faggot." Then she said, "I'd like to fuck you, but I've got the clap." Then she looked at Joe D'Alessandro's picture on the wall and she said, "I'd like to fuck him too, but he wouldn't have time." After that, she noticed the pictures of models in the studio and seemed sad. "Oh my God," she said, "they're beautiful. Are they really that beautiful?" I think one of the things she wanted was to be beautiful, and she knew that she wasn't. And that was the photographer's take on Janis Joplin. So it's a lot to get from that, right, y'all? So immediately I'm like, okay, she straight called him a faggot, which nowadays that's like derogatory. So we don't use that word, right? Or people get offended if you do. Then the next thing she said was she wanted to fuck him, but she had the clap, right? So I was like, well, what is the clap, right? So I literally had to Google what the clap was because I didn't know. And it said gonorrhea. And I'm like, oh, so she's coming to the photo shoot, doing her thing. And she's burning or whatever, however that goes, whatever. And then another thing that struck me was that she kept saying that she wanted to have sex with, random people. Which after doing a little research, I recognized that in the 1960s, it was basically like the hippie era, like sex, drugs, rock and roll type of deal, which that still goes on today in the industry, I've read. But I read that it was really heavy in the industry in the 60s. It was like the hippie era, the Grateful Dead era, and a lot of artists from that time period passed away, most of them from drug overdoses, right? One of two of the things that a lot of the artists had in common, I recognized from that era, was a lot of them suffered from mental illness, and a lot of them had drug addictions. And so, it made me want to look into Janis Joplin more, because I've always heard her name. I just never really paid much attention to her in that way. And then the fact that the photographer said, she wanted to be beautiful and she knew that she wasn't. I was just like, damn, like that was a diss. But, I guess that was his take on her. And so I did some more research and looked into her. I discovered that she died from a heroin overdose October 4th of 1970 in room 105 at the Landmark Motel in Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. And she was only 27 years old. They found her body in the room after she failed to show up to a recording session the next day. But I read how her day went that whole day, before she died. And it just described her being so lonely, like making phone calls to people and, not being able to get in contact with them, leaving messages, nobody ever calling her back, or somebody in particular was supposed to show up for her. I think it was like a manager or something like that was supposed to show up for her, but the person never showed up for her. And so then that made her feel even more lonely. They described her as like a vulnerable, lonely little girl, and that, she was always restless and always seeming like she wanted attention, needed attention, as if she didn't get enough attention. And it was like sad. It was sad because when you hear her perform, I haven't watched video of her performing, but she was always described as this, electric figure. And one of the songs I listened to was Cry Baby. And when I listened to it, well, as soon as it came on, I recognized the song from the film Look Who's Talking with Bruce Willis and Kirstie Alley. And I was like, oh crap, that's literally the song they used in the movie. So I had been introduced to Janis Joplin years ago and didn't even know it, And so I listened to that song all the way through, and I was, I smiled to myself because I was like, wow, she really does blow, you know what I'm saying? Like she really has a lot of soul in her, and she really produces a lot of energy. And, it was said that she suffered from mental illness. She was depressed. She was lonely. She was sad. And I think that she took all of the feelings from how she felt about herself, and she put that into her music, which was clearly evident in a lot of the songs, the titles of a lot of the songs, Cry Baby, right? And she was about to release her third album called Pearl, but she died before she could see the release of it. And they said, or I read that it went on to be like one of her biggest albums, which is crazy because it seems like artists' music usually does blow up even more after their passing. Piece of My Heart was one of her biggest hits. Get It While You Can, Mercedes-Benz, and Me and My Bobby McGee. I do love Piece of My Heart. I love Cry Baby. And it was another one. I forget the name of it. I think it was like Cosmos and Blues. She was going to do an album titled Unalived by the Blues or something like that. And just that title alone lets you know, like, the sadness that resided within her. So I found myself tearing up over this woman that I just really learned about, because her life just seems so sad and so depressing and so lonely, but she produced this amazing art that touched so many people, and it probably made her feel alive to perform in front of people and have people love her. That's when she was on stage, that was probably the most love she ever felt in her life. I'm kind of convinced of that, because I read that in 1966 she was like a drifter, and then over the course of 3 years she just became this major iconic rock and roll star, like right next to Bob Dylan. And she probably didn't see that coming. She blew up in San Francisco, California. It's interesting. She had a short life, but it was so impactful that we still talk about her today. She's still talked about today. People still listen to her music today. So even though in this life when she was alive she didn't feel loved, I hope Janis knows that she is definitely loved and appreciated, even though she didn't feel that way when she was alive. So I just wanted to talk about that because it really touched me. Her story touched me. Everybody's got a story, right? All baddies got a story. And Janis Joplin definitely has one. Comments, y'all?